The smoke rose black and thick against the Arizona sky, and Harrison Ashford stood in the charred ruins of what had been his home 3 hours ago, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Everything he owned, every board he had nailed, every stone he had laid had burned to ash while he was out checking his property lines. And now the September sun beat down on the blackened timber like it was mocking him. The fire had spread so fast through the dry wood that even his neighbors rushing over with buckets could do nothing but watch it burn. And now they stood at a distance, shaking their heads with that look people get when they are grateful it was not their own misfortune. Harrison was 26 years old, tall and lean with dark hair that fell across his forehead when he worked, and he had spent the last 4 years building that cabin with his own 2 hands on land he had claimed just outside Douglas, Arizona. It was 1887, and the territory was still wild enough that a man could stake a claim and make something of himself if he had the grit for it. He had come west from Missouri after his parents died, looking for a fresh start, and he had found it in the high desert country where the Mexican border was just a few miles south, and the town of Douglas was barely more than a collection of buildings clustered around the railroad tracks. Now he had nothing but the clothes on his back and the tools in his shed that had somehow survived, because they were far enough from the house. His horse was safe in the corral, and for that he was grateful, but gratitude felt thin when he looked at the smoking timbers that had been his bed, his table, his stove, his life. "You got family you can stay with?" asked Tom Fletcher, his nearest neighbor, a grizzled man with a gray beard who ran cattle on the property adjacent to Harrison's. Harrison shook his head. "Nobody." "Well, you cannot stay here like this. Winter comes early in these parts, and you will freeze before November if you do not have walls and a roof." Harrison knew Tom was right, but knowing it and accepting it were different things. He walked through the ruins, his boots crunching on charcoal, and tried to salvage anything worth keeping. There was nothing. Everything had burned or melted or been destroyed by the heat. He found the iron pot his mother had given him, warped and blackened, and he picked it up even though it was useless now. "I will manage," Harrison said, though he had no idea how. Tom looked at him with something like pity, which made Harrison's jaw tighten. "You are a stubborn fool, Ashford, but I respect that. If you need anything, you come find me." The neighbors left one by one until Harrison was alone with the ruins and the setting sun. He sat on a rock at the edge of his property and stared at the wreckage, trying to think. He could rebuild, but it would take months, and winter was coming. He had some money saved, but not enough to buy lumber and supplies for a whole new cabin. He could try to find work in town, but that would mean leaving his land unattended, and there were plenty of men who would be happy to claim it if he was not there to defend his stake. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Harrison made a decision. He would dig himself a dugout shelter into the side of the hill on his property. It would not be comfortable, but it would keep him alive through the winter, and he could start rebuilding in the spring. It was not much of a plan, but it was all he had. The next morning, Harrison took his shovel from the shed and started digging into the hillside about 50 yards from where his cabin had stood. The earth was hard and rocky, and every shovelful felt like it took all his strength, but he kept at it. He dug for 3 days straight, carving out a space large enough for him to lie down in and maybe store a few supplies. He used boards from the shed to frame the entrance and keep the dirt walls from collapsing, and he fashioned a crude door from scrap wood. When it was done, it looked like exactly what it was: a hole in the ground with a door. Harrison moved his bedroll and his few remaining possessions into the dugout and tried to make it feel like something other than a grave. It was dark and damp and smelled like earth, And when he lay down that first night, he felt the weight of the ground pressing down on him from all sides. He told himself it was temporary, that he would not be living like this for long, but the truth was he had no idea how long it would take to get back on his feet. The days fell into a rhythm. Harrison spent his mornings tending to his horse and checking his water supply from the small creek that ran through his property. In the afternoons, he rode into Douglas to look for work, taking odd jobs where he could find them. He hauled freight for the general store, repaired fences for ranchers, and did whatever else would put a few dollars in his pocket. It was hard, grinding work, and at the end of each day he rode back to his dugout and crawled inside like an animal going to its den. 3 weeks after the fire, Harrison was in Douglas picking up supplies when he saw her for the first time. She was standing outside the mercantile, loading bags of flour and cornmeal into a wagon, and she moved with the kind of efficiency that came from doing hard work her whole life. She was tall for a woman, with dark brown hair pulled back in a braid that hung down between her shoulder blades, and when she turned to lift another bag, Harrison saw her face. She was maybe 23 or 24, with strong features and eyes that were the color of honey in sunlight. There was something about the set of her jaw that said she did not suffer fools, and Harrison found himself staring longer than was polite. She must have felt his gaze because she looked up and met his eyes. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and then she raised an eyebrow like she was daring him to say something. Harrison felt heat rise in his face, and he tipped his hat and turned away embarrassed. "You need something, mister," she called after him. Harrison stopped and turned back. "No, madam, just admiring your efficiency." She looked at him like she was trying to decide if he was making fun of her. "Efficiency does not load wagons. Hard work does. I did not mean any offense. None taken." She hoisted another bag into the wagon. "You are the fellow who lost his house in the fire, are you not? Harrison Ashford." Harrison was surprised she knew his name. "That is right. I heard about that. Bad luck. That is one way to put it." She finished loading the last bag and wiped her hands on her skirt. "I am Delilah Zimmerman. My father owns the ranch about 2 miles south of your property, or what used to be your property, I suppose. I still have the land. I just do not have much on it anymore." Delilah nodded, and there was something in her expression that might have been sympathy, though she did not look like the type to offer it freely. "What are you living in now? I heard you dug yourself a dugout." Harrison felt his pride sting. "News travels fast. This is a small town. People talk." She studied him for a moment. "That dugout is not going to keep you warm when the snow comes. You know that, right?" "I know it. I am working on a plan." "A plan?" She said it like she did not believe him. "Well, good luck with that. Winter comes early here, and it does not wait for plans." She climbed into the wagon and took the reins, and Harrison watched her drive away down the dusty street. There was something about her that stuck with him, some combination of toughness and directness that he found himself thinking about even after she was out of sight. He shook his head, trying to clear it. He had no business thinking about a woman when he was living in a hole in the ground and barely scraping by. But the truth was, Delilah Zimmerman was hard to forget. 2 days later, Harrison was working on his property, trying to clear away the last of the burned timbers, when he heard the sound of a wagon approaching. He looked up and saw Delilah driving toward him, her wagon loaded with what looked like tools and supplies. He stood up and wiped the sweat from his forehead, wondering what she wanted. She pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down without waiting for him to offer help. "I have been thinking about your situation," she said without preamble. "My situation, living in a dugout. It is foolish, and you are going to freeze to death or get sick before the winter is half over." Harrison felt his defenses rise. I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of myself. Can you? She gestured at the ruins of his cabin. Because from where I stand, it does not look like you are taking care of much of anything. Harrison felt anger flash through him, but he bit it back. She was not wrong, even if she was being blunt about it. What do you want me to say? I lost everything in that fire. I am doing the best I can. Delilah crossed her arms. I am not here to criticize you. I am here to help you. Help me how? I am going to help you build a new cabin before the snow comes. You cannot do it alone, not in time, but with 2 people working, we can get it done. Harrison stared at her. Why would you do that? Because I do not want to hear come spring that you died out here because you were too stubborn to accept help. She paused, and her expression softened slightly. And because my father taught me that neighbors help each other, that is how people survive out here. Harrison did not know what to say. He had been expecting charity or pity, but this was neither. This was practical, almost matter-of-fact, as if helping a stranger build a cabin was the most natural thing in the world. I cannot pay you, he said finally. I did not ask you to pay me. I am offering my time and my labor. You just have to be smart enough to accept it. Harrison looked at her, standing there in her work dress with her hands on her hips, and he realized that arguing with her would be pointless. More than that, he realized he did not want to argue. He needed help, and here it was, offered freely. All right, he said. Thank you. Delilah nodded, and something in her expression eased. Good. Now show me what you have to work with, and let us figure out what we need. They spent the rest of the afternoon going over his property, assessing what materials he had and what he would need to buy. Delilah had a sharp eye for detail, and she asked questions that Harrison had not thought to ask himself. Where would the cabin face to get the most sun in winter? How deep did the foundation need to be to stay level on the slope? Where would they get water, and how close could they build to the creek without risking flood damage? By the time the sun started to set, they had a plan. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but Delilah seemed confident they could do it. We start tomorrow, she said as she climbed back into her wagon. I will be here at dawn, and I expect you to be ready to work. I will be ready. She nodded and drove off, leaving Harrison standing alone in the fading light. For the first time since the fire, he felt something like hope. The next morning, Delilah arrived just as the sun was breaking over the horizon, and she came prepared. Her wagon was loaded with tools, lumber, and supplies, and she had brought food enough for both of them to eat throughout the day. Harrison was already up and waiting, and they got to work immediately. The first task was to lay the foundation. They used stones from the creek bed, hauling them up the slope and setting them in place to create a level base. It was back-breaking work, and by midday, Harrison's shoulders were screaming in protest. Delilah worked beside him without complaint, lifting stones that would have made some men hesitate, and Harrison found himself impressed by her strength. You have done this before, he said as they paused for water. Built a cabin, not from scratch. But I have helped my father with plenty of repairs over the years. You learn a lot when you grow up on a ranch. Your father must be proud of you. Delilah smiled, but there was sadness in it. He was. He died last spring. It is just me and my younger sister now running the ranch. Harrison felt a pang of sympathy. I am sorry. I lost my parents a few years back. I know how hard it is. Then you know that sitting around feeling sorry for yourself does not get the work done. Harrison laughed despite himself. You do not mince words, do you? Life is too short for that. They went back to work, and as the days passed, a rhythm developed between them. Harrison was good with his hands, skilled at carpentry from the years he had spent building his first cabin, and Delilah had an instinct for problem-solving that complemented his skills. When they ran into a challenge, they would talk it through, arguing sometimes but always coming to a solution that worked. The walls went up slowly but steadily. They used logs from the cottonwood trees along the creek, cutting and stripping them, then notching the ends so they fit together snugly. It was precise work, and there was no room for error. One log out of place could weaken the whole structure. Delilah insisted they take their time and do it right, even when Harrison was tempted to rush. "You only get one chance to build a house that will keep you alive through the winter," she said. "Do it right the first time, or you will be doing it again in the spring." As they worked, they talked. At first, the conversation was practical, focused on the task at hand, but gradually it became more personal. Harrison learned that Delilah had grown up on her father's ranch, the oldest of 3 children, and that she had always been more interested in the work than her siblings. Her brother had left for California 2 years ago, chasing gold, and her younger sister, Anna, was 15 and more interested in books than cattle. "She wants to be a teacher," Delilah said one afternoon as they were fitting a crossbeam into place. "I told her she should go back east to one of those schools for women, but she says she wants to stay here. I think she just does not want to leave me alone." "Would you want her to go?" Delilah was quiet for a moment. "I want her to have choices. I did not have many when my father died. Someone had to run the ranch, and I was the only one who knew how. But Anna is smart. She could do more than just survive out here." "Surviving is not nothing," Harrison said. "No, it is not." Delilah looked at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart beat a little faster. "But I think we are meant for more than just surviving. I think we are meant to build something that lasts." Harrison did not know what to say to that, so he just nodded and went back to work. As the weeks passed, the cabin began to take shape. The walls were up, solid and strong, and they started on the roof. This was the trickiest part, because the roof had to be tight enough to keep out rain and snow but strong enough to bear the weight of heavy snowfall. They used saplings for rafters, laying them close together, and then covered them with layers of sod and earth. It was not elegant, but it would work. During this time, Harrison found himself noticing things about Delilah that had nothing to do with the work. The way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The way she laughed, a full, honest sound that seemed to come from deep in her chest. The way she looked at him sometimes, like she was seeing more than he was showing. He tried not to think about it too much. She was helping him because she was a good person, not because she had any interest in him beyond neighborly kindness. But it was hard not to wonder, especially on the days when their hands would brush as they worked, or when they sat together in the evening, eating the food she had brought and watching the sun set over the desert. One evening, as they were sitting outside the half-finished cabin, Delilah asked him why he had come to Arizona. Harrison looked out at the horizon, where the sky was turning gold and pink. "I needed a fresh start. My parents died, and everything back in Missouri felt like a ghost. I heard there was land out here, and I figured I could make something of myself if I just worked hard enough." "And did you make something of yourself?" Harrison laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I thought I had. Then my cabin burned down, and I realized how fragile it all was." "It is not fragile," Delilah said. "You are rebuilding. That is not fragile. That is strength." Harrison looked at her, and in the fading light she looked almost golden herself. "I could not have done this without you. Maybe not, but you would have figured something out. You are tougher than you think." "So are you." Delilah smiled, and for a moment they just sat there, the silence between them comfortable and warm. Then she stood up and brushed off her skirt. "I should get home. Anna will be wondering where I am." "Thank you," Harrison said, "for everything." "You do not have to keep thanking me, Harrison. We are building this together." She climbed into her wagon and drove off into the twilight, and Harrison watched her go, feeling something shift inside him. It was not just gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, something that made him think about what it would be like to have her around, not just for the cabin, but for everything else. The first snow came in mid-October, earlier than expected, and it fell fast and heavy, covering the ground in a white blanket that made everything look clean and new. Harrison woke in his dugout to the sound of silence, the kind of quiet that only comes with snow, and when he crawled outside, he saw Delilah's wagon already approaching through the white landscape. "We need to finish the roof today," she said as soon as she arrived. "If we do not, the snow will get in and ruin everything we have done." They worked through the cold, their breath misting in the air, their fingers numb despite their gloves. The snow kept falling, and Harrison worried they would not finish in time, but Delilah drove them forward with a determination that would not be denied. By late afternoon, the roof was complete, and they stood inside the cabin, looking up at the solid structure above their heads. "It is done," Delilah said, and there was triumph in her voice. Harrison felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost knocked him over. "We did it. We did." Delilah turned to him, and her face was flushed from the cold and the work, and she was smiling in a way that made her look younger, almost carefree. "You have a home, Harrison." Without thinking, Harrison reached out and pulled her into a hug. For a moment, she was stiff with surprise, and then she relaxed and hugged him back. They stood there in the middle of the unfinished cabin, holding each other as the snow fell outside, and Harrison felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like peace. When they finally pulled apart, there was a new awareness between them, a recognition that something had changed. Delilah looked at him, her eyes searching his face, and Harrison saw his own feelings reflected back at him. "I should go," she said softly. "Stay," Harrison said. "The snow is getting worse. You should not drive home in this." Delilah hesitated, and Harrison could see her weighing the practicality against the propriety. "Anna will worry. Then we will ride to your ranch together and let her know you are all right, but you should not go alone." Delilah nodded slowly. "All right." They rode together through the snow, Harrison on his horse and Delilah driving her wagon, and when they reached the Zimmerman ranch, Anna came running out, relief written all over her young face. "I was so worried," Anna said, hugging her sister. "I thought you might be stuck somewhere." "I am fine," Delilah said. "We finished the roof just in time." Anna looked at Harrison, curiosity in her eyes. "You must be Harrison Ashford. Delilah has told me about you." "Has she?" Harrison glanced at Delilah, who looked faintly embarrassed. "She says you are a hard worker and not completely hopeless with a hammer." Harrison laughed. High praise. Anna grinned, and Harrison could see the family resemblance in her smile. "Would you like to come in for supper?" "It is the least we can do after you have been working so hard with my sister." Harrison looked at Delilah, who nodded. "You should stay. The snow is not letting up, and you will need a hot meal before you ride back." They went inside, and Harrison was struck by how warm and welcoming the Zimmerman house was. It was a simple ranch house, but it was well kept and filled with small touches that spoke of care and attention. There were books on the shelves, quilts on the chairs, and the smell of baking bread in the air. Over supper, Harrison learned more about the Zimmerman family. Anna was as bright and curious as Delilah had described, full of questions about life in Missouri and what it was like to build a cabin from scratch. Delilah watched them talk with a small smile, and Harrison could see the affection she had for her sister. After supper, Harrison insisted on leaving even though the snow was still falling. "I have imposed enough," he said, "and I need to check on my horse." "Be careful," Delilah said, walking him to the door. "The trail can be treacherous in the snow." "I will be fine." Harrison paused, his hand on the door. Thank you for today, for all of it. We are not done yet, Delilah said. The cabin still needs a door and windows, and you will need a stove and furniture. There is plenty left to do. Then I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, Delilah agreed, and when she smiled at him, Harrison felt warmth spread through his chest despite the cold outside. Over the next few weeks, they finished the cabin. Harrison built a sturdy door from planks he purchased in town, and Delilah helped him install 2 small windows that would let in light. They found a used stove at the mercantile, and together they hauled it back to the cabin and set it up in the corner. Harrison built a simple bed frame and a table with 2 chairs, and Delilah brought blankets and dishes from her own home. "You need these more than I do," she said when Harrison protested. "I will pay you back." "I do not want you to pay me back. I want you to survive the winter." As they worked on the finishing touches, Harrison found himself watching Delilah more and more. The way she moved, the way she talked, the way she seemed to light up the space around her. He was falling in love with her, and he knew it, but he did not know what to do about it. She was strong and independent, and he was a man who had lost everything and was barely getting back on his feet. What could he offer her one afternoon as they were sitting in the completed cabin, drinking coffee and admiring their work? Delilah said, "You should be proud of this place. It is a good home." "I could not have done it without you," Harrison said. "I mean that. This place exists because of you." Delilah looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression that he had not seen before. "I did not do this just to be neighborly, Harrison." His heart began to beat faster. "Why did you do it?" "Because from the moment I saw you in town, I could not stop thinking about you." She said it simply, like it was a fact, and Harrison felt his breath catch. "I told myself I was just helping a neighbor, but that was not the whole truth. I wanted to know you. I wanted to be near you." Harrison set down his coffee cup and moved closer to her. "I have been thinking about you every day since I met you. I did not think I had any right to say anything, not when I was living in a dugout and had nothing to offer." "I do not care about what you have or do not have," Delilah said. "I care about who you are." Harrison reached out and took her hand, and she let him, her fingers curling around his. "I love you," he said, the words coming out rough and unpolished but true. "I know it is fast and maybe it is foolish, but I love you." Delilah's eyes shone and she squeezed his hand. "It is not foolish. I love you too." Harrison pulled her close and kissed her, and it was like everything in his world finally made sense. She kissed him back with a fierceness that took his breath away, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "What do we do now?" Harrison asked. "We keep building," Delilah said. "Not just the cabin, everything else, together." "Together," Harrison agreed. The snow fell steadily through November and into December, and the cabin proved to be everything they had hoped. It was warm and dry, and the stove kept the cold at bay. Harrison moved his few possessions out of the dugout and into his new home, and it felt like stepping into a new life. He and Delilah saw each other nearly every day. Sometimes she came to his cabin, and sometimes he rode to her ranch. They were courting, though it felt like more than that. It felt like they were building a life together, planning for a future that included both of them. In January, Harrison asked Delilah to marry him. They were standing in his cabin, watching the snow fall outside the windows, and the question came out before he had time to think about it. "Marry me," he said. "I know I do not have much, but I love you, and I want to spend my life with you." Delilah looked at him with tears in her eyes, and she nodded. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They were married in February in a small ceremony at the church in Douglas, with Anna as a witness and Tom Fletcher standing up for Harrison. It was simple and quick, but it felt right. Afterwards, they had a small celebration at the Zimmerman ranch, and Harrison felt like the luckiest man alive. Delilah moved into the cabin with him, bringing her few possessions and making the space feel like a real home. Anna stayed at the ranch, insisting that she was old enough to manage on her own, though Delilah checked on her every few days to make sure she was all right. Life fell into a new rhythm. Harrison and Delilah worked together, tending his land and her ranch, building up both properties. They were partners in every sense of the word, sharing the work and the decisions and the dreams for the future. Harrison had never been happier. In the spring, they planted a garden near the cabin, and Delilah taught Harrison how to grow vegetables in the Arizona soil. They also expanded the corral and bought a few more horses, planning to breed them and sell the colts. It was hard work, but it was good work, and they did it together. By summer, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told Harrison one evening as they sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun set over the desert. "I am going to have a baby," she said, and there was joy and fear in her voice. Harrison pulled her close, his heart swelling with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "I am more than happy. I am grateful. For you, for this life, for everything." Delilah leaned against him, and they sat there together as the stars came out, thinking about the future and all the possibilities it held. The baby was born in early February, almost exactly a year after they had married. It was a boy, and they named him Henry, after Harrison's father. He had Delilah's eyes and Harrison's dark hair, and from the moment Harrison held him, he knew that his life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. Delilah was a natural mother, strong and capable even in the exhaustion of those early days. Harrison did everything he could to help, taking over more of the ranch work so she could rest and care for the baby. Anna came over often, delighted to be an aunt, and she would hold Henry for hours, singing to him and telling him stories. As Henry grew, the cabin that Harrison and Delilah had built together began to feel small, but it was filled with love and laughter. Harrison added on a small room for the baby, working in the evenings after the day's chores were done, and Delilah helped him, just as she had helped him build the original cabin. "We are getting good at this," Harrison said one night as they worked on framing the new room. "We are," Delilah agreed. "We make a good team, the best team." By the time Henry was 2, Delilah was pregnant again, and this time it was a girl. They named her Rose after Delilah's mother, and she was as fierce and strong-willed as her mother from the very beginning. Harrison loved watching his family grow, loved the noise and chaos and joy that came with children. Anna eventually went east to attend a teaching college, and Harrison and Delilah bought her share of the Zimmerman ranch, combining it with their own land. They became one of the more successful ranching families in the area, known for their hard work and their fair dealings. But more than that, they were known for their love for each other, a love that had been built on mutual respect and partnership, and the willingness to work together through hard times. Years passed, and the cabin that Harrison had thought would be temporary became the foundation of a much larger house. They added rooms as the family grew, until it was a sprawling ranch house that could accommodate their 4 children. Henry, Rose, and later twin boys they named Daniel and Samuel. Harrison never forgot the fire that had taken his first home, but he no longer thought of it as a tragedy. It had brought him to the lowest point of his life, yes, but it had also brought him Delilah. And Delilah had given him everything he had ever wanted: a home, a family, a purpose. One evening, when Harrison was 50 and Delilah was 47, they sat on the porch of their home, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Henry had married a girl from town and had 3 children of his own, and Rose had just announced that she was expecting her first baby. "Do you ever think about that dugout?" Delilah asked, her hand in his. Harrison smiled. "Sometimes. It feels like a lifetime ago." It was a lifetime ago. We were different people then. We were, Harrison agreed, but I think we were always meant to be together. Even when I was at my lowest, when I had nothing, you saw something in me worth saving. I saw a man who was willing to work hard and not give up, Delilah said. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. They sat there in the fading light, holding hands and watching the sun set over the land they had built together. Harrison thought about the young man he had been, standing in the ruins of his burned cabin with no idea what to do next. He thought about the woman who had appeared in his life like a miracle, offering help when he needed it most. And he thought about the life they had built, log by log, day by day, through hard work and love. I love you, he said, the words as true now as they had been that first day in the cabin. I love you too, Delilah said. Always. As the stars came out, Harrison felt a deep sense of peace. His life had not turned out the way he had planned when he came west all those years ago, but it had turned out better. He had lost his home, but he had found something far more valuable. He had found Delilah, and together they had built not just a cabin or a ranch, but a life filled with love and family and purpose. The dugout was long gone, filled in and forgotten, but the cabin they had built together still stood, now the heart of a home that had grown far beyond what either of them could have imagined. It was a testament to what two people could accomplish when they worked together, when they believed in each other, when they refused to give up. Harrison squeezed Delilah's hand, and she squeezed back, and they sat there together as the night settled around them, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every blessing that had brought them to this place. Their story had started with loss and desperation, with a man living in a hole in the ground and a woman brave enough to offer help. But it had become something beautiful, something lasting. It had become a love story, pure and simple, and it would endure long after they were gone, carried on in their children and their children's children, a legacy of strength and partnership and unwavering devotion. The cabin they had built before the snow had become more than just shelter. It had become home, and that home, built on the foundation of their love, would stand for generations, a reminder that even in the hardest times when everything seems lost, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of rebuilding. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, there is someone who will stand beside you and help you build something even better than what you had before. Harrison and Delilah had been that lucky, and they knew it. Every day for the rest of their lives, they woke up grateful for the fire that had brought them together, for the cabin they had built, and for the love that had sustained them through every season, every challenge, every joy. As they grew older, Harrison and Delilah became fixtures in the Douglas community, respected not just for their success but for their character. They were the couple people pointed to when they wanted to show what a good marriage looked like, what partnership really meant. Young couples would come to them for advice, and Harrison and Delilah would tell them the same thing every time. Work together, respect each other, and never stop building. When Harrison was 62, he fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For a while, it looked like he might not recover, and Delilah sat by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave him. The children took turns staying with them, and Anna, now a retired teacher living in town, came to help care for her brother-in-law. But Harrison was stubborn, and with Delilah's determination and the doctor's care, he pulled through. When he was finally well enough to sit up and take notice of the world again, the first thing he saw was Delilah's face, lined with worry but filled with relief. "You scared me," she said, her voice shaking. "I am sorry," Harrison said, taking her hand. "But I could not leave you. We have too much left to do." Delilah laughed through her tears. "Always building even when you are sick. Always, Harrison agreed. He recovered slowly but completely, and by spring he was back to working the ranch, though at a slower pace than before. Delilah insisted he take it easy, and for once, Harrison listened. They spent more time sitting on the porch, watching the world go by, enjoying the quiet moments together. Their children had all grown into capable, successful adults, and Harrison and Delilah took pride in knowing they had raised them well. Henry ran the main ranch operations now, with Daniel and Samuel helping him. Rose had married a banker from Tucson and lived in town, but she visited often with her children. The house that had started as a simple cabin was now always full of family, full of noise and life and love. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. There were nearly 30 people crowded into the house and spilling out onto the porch, 3 generations of Ashfords and Zimmermans, all connected by the love story that had started with a fire and a dugout, and a woman brave enough to help a stranger. Harrison stood up to speak, his hand shaking slightly as he raised his glass. 30 years ago, I thought my life was over. I had lost everything, and I was living in a hole in the ground, wondering how I was going to survive. And then Delilah appeared like a miracle, and she helped me build a cabin before the snow came. But she did not just help me build a cabin. She helped me build a life. She gave me everything I have. This home, this family, this happiness. I love you, Delilah, more than words can say, and I thank God every day that my cabin burned down because it brought me to you. There was not a dry eye in the room, and Delilah stood up and kissed him, and everyone cheered. The celebration went on late into the night, with music and dancing and stories, and Harrison felt his heart swell with gratitude for every moment, every memory, every blessing. As the years continued to pass, Harrison and Delilah settled into the comfortable rhythm of old age. They still worked, but less strenuously, and they spent more time enjoying the fruits of their labor. They traveled a few times, visiting Anna in town and taking a trip to California to see Rose. But they always came back to the ranch, to the house they had built, because that was where they belonged. Harrison was 73 when Delilah woke him one morning and said, "I think we should build one more thing." "What is that?" Harrison asked, amused. "A gazebo in the garden. Somewhere we can sit and watch the sunset." Harrison smiled. "All right, let us build a gazebo." They worked on it together, just the two of them, taking their time and enjoying the process. It was nothing like the urgency of building the cabin all those years ago, when winter was breathing down their necks. This was leisurely, peaceful, a project done purely for the joy of it. When it was finished, they sat in the gazebo and watched the sun set over the land they loved, and Delilah leaned her head on Harrison's shoulder. "We have had a good life," she said. "The best life," Harrison agreed. "Do you have any regrets?" Harrison thought about it. "Only that we did not have more time. But then, I think I would always want more time with you, no matter how much we had." "I feel the same way." They sat there in silence, watching the sky turn gold and pink and purple, and Harrison felt a deep contentment settle over him. He had lived a full life, a life rich with love and family and purpose. He had faced hardship and overcome it. He had built something that would last. When Harrison was 76, he passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Delilah holding his hand. The entire community came to his funeral, and people told stories about his kindness, his work ethic, his unwavering love for his wife. He was buried on the ranch, in a spot overlooking the land he had claimed and built into something beautiful. Delilah lived for another 8 years after Harrison's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She stayed in the house they had built together, refusing to leave even when her children suggested she might be more comfortable in town. "This is my home," she said. "This is where I belong." She spent her days tending the garden, sitting in the gazebo, and telling stories about Harrison to anyone who would listen. She spoke of him with such love and pride that it was clear to everyone that her heart had never stopped belonging to him. When Delilah passed away at 84, she was buried next to Harrison, and the entire family gathered to celebrate her life. They told stories about the cabin she had helped build, about the love she and Harrison had shared, about the legacy they had left behind. The house they had built stood for many more years, passed down through the generations, and it became a landmark in the area. People would point to it and say, "That is the Ashford place. It was built by a man who lost everything and a woman who helped him build it back." It is a house built on love. And it was true. The cabin that Harrison and Delilah had built before the snow came had grown into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It had become a symbol of resilience and partnership, of what two people can accomplish when they work together and believe in each other. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually live in that house, and they would grow up hearing the story of how it all began. With a fire, a dugout, a woman with a wagon full of supplies, and a love that refused to be defeated by hardship. It was a story that became family legend, passed down with pride from one generation to the next. The dugout where Harrison had lived in his darkest days was long forgotten, reclaimed by the earth from which it had been carved. But the cabin, the house, the home they had built together endured, standing as a testament to their love and their determination. In the end, Harrison and Delilah's story was not about loss or hardship, though those things were part of it. It was about hope and rebuilding and the transformative power of love. It was about two people who met at the right time, in the right place, and chose to build something beautiful together. It was a story that began with a man who had lost his home and lived in a dirt dugout, and a woman who helped him build a cabin before the snow came. But it became so much more than that. It became a love story for the ages, a reminder that even when everything seems lost, there is always the possibility of beginning again. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, you find someone who will help you build not just a cabin, but a life filled with love and meaning and joy. That was the legacy Harrison and Delilah left behind, and it lived on long after they were gone, in the house they built, in the family they raised, and in the hearts of everyone who heard their story and understood that true love is not just about romance or passion, though those things matter. True love is about showing up, day after day, and working together to build something that will last. It is about partnership and respect and the willingness to face hardship together and come out stronger on the other side. Harrison and Delilah had done that, and in doing so, they had created something eternal. Their love story had started in the Wild West town of Douglas, Arizona, in 1887 with a fire and a dugout and a brave woman with a wagon. It had grown into a legend, a testament to the enduring power of love and the human spirit's ability to overcome any obstacle. And on warm summer evenings, when the family gathered on the porch of the house that Harrison and Delilah had built, they would look out over the land and remember the two people who had started it all. They would remember the cabin built before the snow and the love that had made it all possible. And they would be grateful, knowing that they were the beneficiaries of a love story that had transcended time and hardship to become something truly beautiful. The land still bore the marks of Harrison and Delilah's labor. The garden they had planted together, now expanded and lush, the corral where they had raised horses, the gazebo where they had spent their final years together watching the sunset. And in the center of it all stood the house, solid and enduring, built on a foundation of love that would never crumble. That was how the story ended, and yet in another sense, it never ended at all. Because love, like Harrison and Delilah's, does not die. It lives on in the people who remember it, in the family who carries their blood and their values, in the house that still stands as a monument to what they accomplished together. They had built more than a cabin before the snow came. They had built a legacy of love that would endure for generations, a reminder that even in the darkest times when all seems lost, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of rebuilding. And there is always the chance, if you are open to it, of finding someone who will stand beside you and help you build something beautiful. Harrison and Delilah had found that in each other, and in doing so, they had created something that transcended their own lives. They had created a love story that would be told and retold, remembered and cherished, for as long as the house they built together continued to stand. And it would stand for a very long time, because it was built on the strongest foundation of all, the love between two people who refused to give up, who chose to work together through every challenge, and who proved that with determination, partnership, and love, anything is possible. That was the story of Harrison Ashford and Delilah Zimmerman, two people who met in the Wild West and built a life together that became the stuff of legend. It was a story of loss and redemption, of hardship and triumph, of two souls who found each other when they needed each other most, and created something that would last forever. The cabin they built before the snow came was more than just shelter from the cold. It was the first chapter in a love story that would span decades and touch countless lives. And long after Harrison and Delilah were gone, that love story continued to inspire anyone who heard it, reminding them that true love is built, day by day, log by log, with patience and hard work and an unwavering commitment to each other. That was their gift to the world, and it was a gift that would never be forgotten.